Social workers of Alabama, how you all doing today? I am so glad to be speaking with you all today, and we are going to get started because I have some information I want to share with you all. Man, it's on some interesting topics, some things that have been trending, and let me tell you, I have spent probably about an hour and a half after supervision just getting deeper into this subject, into this topic, and it's like, well, why are you doing that? And it's truly because I care about social workers. I care about the way that we are put in place to impact lives. And if it's some way that I can help, this is an active group, and I really appreciate you all. And you all don't recognize how much influence that you all are having on the community, how much you are impacting others. And me being able to be a part of that makes me excited. And yes, it makes me take the time to sit down to make sure that I explain things well. And some of the things that I'm intending to explain have a lot to do with what's been trending in supervision. Lately, there has been a trend. I don't know if you all have been experiencing it. We know that the suicide rates are going up. They've been skyrocketing. I think they had some of the largest reports of death by suicide in 2022. May have had something different since 2024. I haven't seen the most recent stats, but in the community of social workers, this is the first time. I have four groups. This is the first time that we have had situations where there are so many of the clinicians experiencing um, issues relative to suicide all at one time. And so I said, if this is happening with us, it must be happening in other places. And so I decided to talk about, and title is it a full moon? Why so many suicides? Tactics to navigate with high risk clients. And that's what we're going to talk about today is what are the tactics that we can use to navigate with high risk clients? Because if we're experiencing this, if we have situations with our supervisees, with clients, we want to be able to make sure that we have what's needed to support them, and that's what this is. This is exactly what we're going to talk about today, as we explore some of the topics and the subject matter that was discussed in supervision. But just before we do that, I do want to share with you all about some of our upcoming events. And we're so excited to let you know that we have a free event. Um, and this event will be held on next week, Tuesday. It's free to those who are part of Social Workers of Alabama. If you're not, you need to sign up. But it's if not, it's $10 to $15. It's called the title is Perinatal Mental Health Empowering Social Workers Through Education. And we are so happy to have Laura or LB Brown to support us with this. We are so excited and we're looking forward to that. We've had quite a few people sign up. So sign up so that you can join us. All right. Also, really quickly, we have the DSM-5 training coming up, and that the free one is on the 20th. On August 27th, we will be having the DSM 5 training. For those of you all who are LICSWs, this is a training that you will have to have either from us or somebody else. We hope you join us. All right. And then we have that same training in the format of on demand. In the on demand format, you can get that, and we'll have details. And then also, we have the supervisor training, and that will be on November 11th and 12th. So we want you all to come through. And if you see that there's a training that you want to attend, please join us. But let's get to the subject matter. We have a lot to cover in this short period of time. So I'm going to be just kind of storming through it because I really took a lot of time to try to identify some things that I think is very important. And as I mentioned, it's been at least probably about four scenarios. One, with someone who actually rescued someone who was, four scenarios we have is someone actually, a social worker actually rescuing someone who was in the act of suicide. Um, and then also someone who was able to assess that I better get help. I better get help. I better call emergency services and get them to come in and support with this situation because my clinical senses are telling me that this is a high risk situation. Another situation was an experience with someone actually losing someone death by suicide, an actual supervisee. And so this is something that we have to work with as supervisors, and it's very difficult because no one wants to ever lose a client to suicide, right? But we need to talk about these issues, and we're going to talk about how you work through some of that. And we want to start off with just some things, and we've been going through a lot of this lately. But what are some of the high risk populations? I'm not going to name them all, but what are some of the high risk populations that we have in mind, that you have in mind, that we need to know about? That and what I'm saying is that this is important and it means a lot, but it means nothing. And when I say it means a lot, understanding these populations helps us to be able to have an idea if someone might be a risk. However, it means nothing. When I say that it means nothing, is that there is no firm predictor of suicide. Okay. And so, or someone who has symptoms, there's no for matter of fact, I think it's over 50, I want to say 58% in one study, something crazy like that, of individuals who actually experienced death by suicide did not have a mental health diagnosis. So when we talk about the things that you should know, the high risk populations, this is very necessary and important to know. But we also have to keep in mind that many times there's no firm predictor of this occurring, which is something to keep in mind, which is telling us that we don't really have control over situations that occur without our awareness. Now, sometimes there's a lack of clinical judgment, lack of questions, and things like that. But many times the client is very aware of how to hide these things, and nobody knows. Almost kind of like the guy that that took his life. That was on the Ellen DeGeneres show. This happens because many times people are sad and they don't have any other answers. Okay, so let's take a look here. So high risk populations, 2021, suicide was the second leading cause of death for ages what? This is amazing. Second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14 and 20 to 34. I don't know how it's two, but so a lot of times we don't think of children 10 to 14. This hits right now for our clinic. So yeah, so this thing is serious, right? Also men, okay? Men, some stats say 70 to 80%. Of course, you just don't look at all men as as being ones that may look to suicide. But we want to keep this in mind. Also, veterans, high risk. Most, and I want to come back. Most suicide um is experienced by men. Okay, high degree of that, but sometimes we can get caught up in that and not realize that this can occur with women, and we may talk about that a little bit about that before we done. Seniors, this was a recent situation that we were working with, and I must say this: those who are bullied and don't feel like this, I put in this thing PowerPoints because I could go a whole hour off of this. I'm gonna use this one day, but bullied, individuals who don't feel that they fit in or feel unsupported. What are some situations? And this is very important because this kind of showed up in each one of the scenarios. We had about four more scenarios where this was relevant. Um, and so a relationship problem, that's a big one. With my experience with clients, they often have had impressions or have suicidal thoughts when there's complexity in relationships. I can get into a whole lot about that, but we don't have time. But that's something to keep in mind. Dang, we're at 10 minutes already. Crisis, and I'm only on the second line. Crisis in the past or upcoming 2 weeks. So something that is a crisis has just occurred. Okay. Um, or there's an upcoming crisis. Um, I got a situation I want to talk. It wasn't a client to talk about that. And then problematic substance use. That's a significant one. That was relative to what we were experiencing in the scenarios with different supervisees. Another thing I may fail to mention, if your supervisee does experience someone who is having strong ideation or who experiences a client experiences death by suicide, you if you're in a group situation, you want to make sure you work with them separately as much as needed as they work through that. And I just want to make sure I put that out. We'll come back to that, but I'm running out of time. How do you know if someone is having a problematic substance use situation? Because it's saying problematic substance use. Well, what does that mean? How many drinks can we have? Well, we used to, I think, number it by drinks and things like that. But now we have little tools that help us to get some perspective to see if it's a problem. And what tool would you use to help you out with that? Well, one I would like to name is called the Cage. And the Cage questionnaire, they've adapted it from what I understand. Where it used to more maybe focus, don't quote me on, focus on drinking. Now maybe drinking and drug use as well. But what does CAGE stand for? CAGE is an acronym or mnemonic or whatever for C for cut down. Question would be, have you ever tried to cut down on drinking? So cutting down, if a person's had a problem with that, they may be a problem drinker, may have a substance use disorder or something like that. Annoyed. Have people annoyed you about your drinking? Um, that's another one. That's A for CA. And then we have G. Guilty. Have you felt guilt or have you ever felt guilty about your drinking? And then E is for eye opener. Have you ever had a drink first thing in the morning to steady your nerves or get rid of a hangover? Um, Been a long time. I'm not a drinker since that happened, but I could. That's not a great feeling. Glad we're done with the drinking situations. But these are issues that people often experience in order to try to solve their problems. And many times, in using drinking and drugs to try to solve problems, we have individuals who actually are having suicidal ideation. What are some behaviors that we need to be mindful of? Depression and then a sudden burst of energy. This was one of the scenarios, right? So sometimes if you have someone, and these are real life scenarios here, right? So you have someone who is one of the questions I raised in the group. If you have someone who okay, we may get to the example. Oh, we're not going to get to all of it. But one of the examples was, um, so someone says, well, let me just stick with the script here. Depression and then a sudden burst of energy. So someone experiences depression. They're laying in bed days in and days out. They're not eating. They're not wanting to talk to anybody. Then all of a sudden they have a burst of energy and they just seem somewhat euphoric or something like that. Bad sign. A lot of times we have to rule out that many times this euphoria often occurs when individuals start to think about death, thinking about that, hey, after this happens, after I do whatever I do, then I'm going to be experiencing happy times. So a euphoria can come about. So that's something to be aware of. Significant changes in behaviors. They were working out. They used to be working out, not working out anymore. Used to shop. You like, girl, you don't want to shop? Something must be wrong. Absolutely, something might be wrong if she doesn't want to shop, or he doesn't want to shop, or he doesn't want to work out, or just has a sudden change in behaviors, begins to isolate, things like that. That's something that we want to be mindful of. Either depression or suicide, right? Are common with these behaviors. Loss of job. Boy, I don't want to talk too much about this because I don't have a lot of time, but I experienced a situation that I often talk about with a loved one, and they had a loss of their job, and their identity was firmly established in that position. So people who, and I hate to say it, people who don't even let you call them by their name because doctor, whoever, whatever, this and that. These a lot of times are people, I shouldn't be saying, but that are firmly established because you've made that your identity. I even think of the football player and I like to hear him talk sometimes. Ocho Cinco. That's your identity. Ocho, for those of you all don't know Spanish, which I don't. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis. Ocho Cinco. I think that was Ocho eight. I don't know. Eight and three. I'm not good with Spanish. Okay. But those were the numbers on his jersey. Ocho, nueve, diez. Eight. Okay. Cinco, five, I think. Okay. 85 or something like that. Anyway, y'all get what I'm saying. So Ocho Cinco, this guy changed his name to Ocho Cinco because that was the name of his jersey or the number on his jersey, 85, in Spanish. Okay. So which was clever. But this is the thing where someone who maybe not him, but I'm just saying when you have your identity firmly established in something and this is what makes you happy, this is your everything, and it's taken away, then many times we have to watch out for that. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be that way, but we have to watch out. And in this situation, the person that we knew was firmly established and work had promoted from what they used to be, and then had a crisis to which, they weren't very kind to people. And then things were being taken away from them, okay, to where they were about to be demoted significantly. Their career may not have been able to continue, and then they decided to suicide. So and it was a very horrific situation. But identity. So these are some of the things we look at. We have to try to get ahead of the actions of the client. We have to have our own impressions. Suicide letters, expressions of having no reason to live. And I want to talk about this because I didn't downplay this, but I don't think I raised up the importance of this. How many of you are familiar with NSSI? NSSI. What does that stand for? That stands for non-suicidal injury. Non-suicidal self-injury. Yeah, I left the S out. Non-suicidal self-injury. What is that? Non-suicidal types of behaviors or cutting is a very common one. Cutting head, banging your head against the wall, burning yourself, putting fire to your skin, pulling out your hair, a number of behaviors that are not considered lethal. But a lot of times with cutting, we think that somebody is suicidal or trying to kill themselves. Many times it has not as much to do with that as much as is self-soothing. However, um, I've always said that these individuals often seem very dark, and I've just looked over the stat and just not paid attention. But I'm gonna read you this stat to show you how important it is to pay attention if you have witnessed anyone that's a client and or aware of anyone that's a client having non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors. 70% have attempted suicide at least once. Okay. So at that time, they may just be calming themselves. At that time, they may not be suicidal, but many times it's very dark for these individuals. And you need to take even those actions seriously because suicide and thoughts of suicide sometimes is just around the corner. That's not to say everybody that's cutting is having mortal thoughts of death and taking their lives. That's not true. However, there is some level of a correlation because the numbers are saying, and I think this is a government number, 70% have attempted suicide at least once and 55% several times. 70% of individuals who experience non-suicidal self-injury, 70% have attempted suicide at least once, and most of them have attempted several times. So that needs to let you know something about your client or anybody that you know that has non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors. If I said that right. You need to be keeping that stat in mind. Doesn't mean that this is what your person or your client is experiencing, but we have to bring that data to the table. This is super important, y'all. And I'm telling you, a lot of us miss out not knowing these stats. A cutter, yes, likely if you have a cutter, it's a 50% chance, more than 50% chance that they have attempted suicide. Just let that sit. Okay. 70% um have attempted no, I'm saying it wrong. 70% cutters, individuals that cut, they're saying 70% have attempted suicide at least one time, and 55% several times. We're not even just talking about the thought, attempts. So these types of behaviors we do not want to take lightly. Okay. There's a number of other behaviors that we'll see, but we got to close out. Don't This is really important, especially for the group, because we are a lot of us are in the caregiving space. We're all in the caregiving space, but in the caregiving space, especially what we do, social workers, sometimes there are codependent behaviors. Okay. We just want to please others. We have the need to please others. We have the need to be needed. Okay. It's something important to know about that. And this is what one of the scenarios that we experience with the supervisee is that, look, if you say, let's just have this scenario, you have someone you're working with, you go to see them, and they say, you know what, you go to see them, or they're in the office and they say, you know what, I'm having suicidal thoughts. And then, the answer is, well, do you, the question is, well, do you have a plan? And they say, I have several. What is the protocol that you need to follow after that? Okay. Um, you have to make your own clinical judgment. In most cases, we would want to know what type of plan you have to see if it's something that is really you know, considered to be lethal, as far as the planning, to see if if it would really be what you're thinking of is really something that could harm you, or if you're just having thoughts. But sometimes, as in one of the scenarios that I've experienced more recently, is that sometimes you as a clinician may make a decision that we're just going to get help now. Now, this is the thing. If you are a people pleaser, you may have fear of calling for help or telling them that I'm going to get help, and it can cost them their life. Your fear of disrupting them or upsetting them can cost them their life, when in actuality, many times this is somewhat a cry for help, because they may have true intention. And this was actually the situation. Someone had true intention. Okay. um and the clinician was very aggressive to call for help, which that means that we're trying to get emergency services, we're trying to get them into an institution where they can get some management, some medications, some psychotherapy, whatever they need, right? So let's not let our because our feelings of not offending someone can actually cost them their lives. So that's worse than offending them. Okay. They told you what they told you for a reason. And whether you want to or not, it's our due diligence as social workers at every level to take action. Okay. So don't let your fear get in the way. And I mentioned the cage. Sometimes when somebody's very depressed or something like that, there are skills that we can use. I think with like the PHQ 9, we can assess for depression, and things like that. Other tools for assessing suicide. So these are tools that we can use, and you don't have to be a clinical social worker. This is someone, if you work in a nursing home, bachelor's level, things like that, you can use it. Another thing, um, you're talking to a client, and they're just like, I'm tired. They just they don't have the energy. They're just fatigued, and as you're trying to process things with them, they just don't seem to have the energy to even talk. And then every time you mention something, they just say, I'm just tired. I'm just tired. And then let's just say they will not commit to, and we're talking about what are some signs, and this is what I asked the group, what are some signs that we are having people who are clients who are higher risk. Okay, well, these are some things, and I'm going longer on this because I think it's really important. But what are some signs? So they're just talking about they're tired, and then when you try to get them to commit to scheduling a visit, if they are to have impulses and things like that, they just say, I can't commit to that, I can't commit to you, I can't promise you I'm not going to do anything, or just saying like I'm not going to agree to anything, like making a phone call, I'm not agreeing to any interventions. These are higher risk individuals. I'm just tired. So we want to take this very seriously. And one of the things that is very important when they are this low, and a lot of times you've already used your scale to assess where they are, your depression inventory, and we're seeing that, hey man, it's critical. Then we at some point we have to make the assessment that it may be necessary for them to have um uh an admission, if they're not willing to do an admission, and they're not having a plan or something like that, because whether they want to go in or not and they have a plan, it's our due diligence that we have to make the call. But if they are having high suicidal ideation, we often should recommend that they speak with their physician or psychiatrist about getting medications. These medications are super effective. However, they do take time to metabolize. These are things that we should know. So advise them that they should consider this. Let them know, find out what their fears are about medication. Let them know this is not like a sentence. You don't have to take this forever. If it doesn't work, you can look at changes. If you're concerned about side effects, you can your doctor can find you something else. It doesn't have to be permanent. The side effects are usually not that great. And we have more successes than we have reports of side effects, especially with someone who is experiencing symptoms like what you are, not especially with somebody who's suicidal. You don't say it like that, right? And so we need to take these things in consideration. Um, and we need to know that if you're in private practice or something like that, we need to know that yeah, we're only in most cases supposed to be able to bill once per week, but when there's a crisis, when there's suicidal ideation, many times insurance will pay for another visit if it's necessary, if it's deemed medically necessary. And I've done that. I can't tell you if I got paid for it or not because I didn't go track it, but it's been numerous times where I've had to see a client more than once within a week. Normally that's not allowed. All right, and so then if you do have a supervisee that experiences some of these symptoms here, not the symptoms, the supervisee that experiences maybe losing someone by suicide under their watch, we have to take the due diligence to follow up with them, not just for the sake of administration and checking, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but to see how their well-being is. If a client dies by suicide and you need to debrief with the supervisee. How are you doing? What's been the impact of this situation? Have you considered some days off if they need, if they're taking it very pretty bad? Assess their feelings of guilt, shame, and blame. We can't help but do that in most cases when this happens. You want them to be able to level off. They may need to seek psychotherapy for themselves. Help them focus on the greater mission and other clients that are relying on them. Evaluate then, after all that's been done, what happened, documentation, preventatives, how to move forward, and all the rest of the administrative things. Sometimes we get it twisted about how this should happen. But first, you want to make sure the well-being of the supervisee is intact before we just jump into, well, what happened, what did you do, and all these kinds of things, right? All right, I hope this is helpful. I've gone about 30 minutes. Somebody will watch it, I hope, and it'll help. But if we will see, we will see. I talked a lot, but this is important. I knew it was gonna be long, and I hope it helps. And I hope that if you have a supervisee or if you're experiencing it yourself, that some of these steps will be effective with helping you with better management, better predictability, and better intervention. Y'all take care, and we'll see you on next week. All right. Bye bye.